Mike wants to talk to you. 345-5858. This is 58 Live with Mike Agnello on the Voice of Charleston, 58 WCHS.
Roger Bryant produced it on 58 Live. Perfect song. We can't back down. This is so much bigger than Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. I can't overstate what's going on. And I'm talking about what culminated today with the president standing up there, surrounding himself with children, and then going past the Constitution, some more of executive orders, trying to create law. And it was never intended for that. I'm talking about executive orders. Edward Meese talked about that today on Newsmax and some other places. But I'm with somebody I don't think is going to back down. I've known him for a number of years. He's going to be my guest for the entirety of the hour. I welcome Keith Morgan with the West Virginia Citizens Defense League. Keith, welcome to the program, sir.
Great to be here, Mike.
Well, then we kind of dedicate that song to you today, brother.
Yeah, I was going to comment on the appropriateness of that because I won't be backing down, neither will our membership.
Well, we are up against it. And when I say we, I am a huge supporter, NRA, Citizens, Defense League, all you stand for, Second Amendment, First Amendment. In fact, I'm kind of for the Constitution. I know that makes me kind of an oddball today. But, you really think about it. I'll tell you what, Joshua Nelson was on the program a couple days ago, and they're having that big rally.
Guy.
Yeah, big rally, 9 o'clock. I'm going to be there 9 o'clock on Saturday at the state capitol.
You'll see some of our people there. We're actually backing that. We've got whatever membership can make it out to Senator Manchin's office in Martinsburg are headed over there. The rest, from Charleston and Points West, are probably going to be down there with you guys.
Well, I'll certainly be there. I'm just going to be there. I'm not scheduled to speak. I just want to be there as a citizen, as a West Virginian, as an American. These whatever they were, these 20 whatever they were, executive orders. Even, Shelley Moore Capito stood up strong in her press release today and said he's bypassing duly elected House of Representatives. That's just not how the country was designed to work. But tell me about, and we'll get to all of it. I know there's so much to cover, but we've got time. There's no rush. Tell me about the conversation you had just a few days ago with Senator Joe Manchin.
Well, the conversation was actually yesterday.
Oh, was it yesterday?
Yeah,
okay.
it was yesterday, and the best way that I can describe it is that it was a train wreck. And I need to fill you in with some backstory on how we got to the point where I was actually meeting with the senator. When he first came out talking about how he only needs 3 bullets in his gun, we pretty much immediately went on the attack with the Elmer Fudd angle. Because, hey, Joe, the Second Amendment's not about deer hunting. And the Elmer Fudd angle picked up a lot of traction. We didn't do this, but our membership and members of the general public showed up at our protest on December 22nd. They were carrying signs that had Elmer Fudd's likeness on it, and guys had T-shirts made. It was that's got real traction, and I think it disturbed him. Shortly thereafter, I got a phone call from the senator, and I believe he kind of prides himself as a consensus builder, and so that was the direction of what he was talking with me, and he said, I'm a big fan of bringing people together. I said, well, Senator Manchin, I'm big fan of that too. We're going to be bringing a couple of hundred together outside your offices. We'd love to see you there. He didn't show up. So this occurred, and some other folks in the Second Amendment community here in West Virginia, he brought them together, and it was the right people. And he talked to these guys, and they're saying...
And who was the people he brought together?
He brought together the presidents of various gun clubs, Putnam County Gun Club, I know Mason-Dixon Rifle Club up in Morgantown, Mac McMillan, and several other folks that are involved in gun rights and shooting and hunting and so forth. And so he brought all these guys together, and... I know that Mac McMillan, president of the Putnam County Gun Club, told him, Joe, the reason I'm on this call is because I think we can save you. And then shortly thereafter, Senator Manchin started changing his tune in the media. He was saying things like he didn't see a gun ban as part of the solution, etc. And then I walked into that meeting with him, and I was prepared to kind of follow Mac's lead there. How do we save you? How do we save your reputation with West Virginia gun owners? That's the mentality I walked in with. And what I ran into, it was just an absolute train wreck. The arguments that he was bringing up were quite shocking. They were straight out of the anti-gun playbook. And I tried to educate the guy on some points. And, the questions I would get, you've heard this before. Why does anybody need a 30-round magazine? I had a retort to that. I said, well, Senator Manchin, the state police worked for you for years, and they have 30-round magazines. They face the same threats we face. Why do they need 30-round magazines, but we only need 10? And it came around, this was one point where he said he simply doesn't see the self-defense angle. He said he wasn't brought up that way, and he doesn't see the Second Amendment that way.
But isn't he then joining the rest of the crowd when you take the interpretation of the Second Amendment that's been clearly defined by federal courts, by the United States Supreme Court, especially in Washington, D.C., and in Chicago, and putting his values or his personal values in the interpretation of the Second Amendment? I don't really care what he thinks I need. I mean, that's his value being put on my rights.
Well, yeah, and it's really unfortunate that so many people think this way, and I was quite frankly shocked to hear a United States senator that didn't understand the purpose of the Second Amendment. I broke down Federalist Papers 46 for him. Okay,
you know what? We're getting close on time. I want you to, when we come back, I'm with Keith Morgan here. I want you to break down, because I talked about the Federalist Papers a little bit yesterday. I want you to break this down for people that here's what the Constitution says, not what their interpretation, this value system, the president's, whatever his edicts. It's about the Constitution. It's about our rights. I'm here with Keith Morgan. You don't want to miss the rest of this program. More to come here on 58 Live. This is Mike Agnello, the night voice on WCHS, the voice of Charleston.
To you, Mike is talking about it. 345-5858. This is 58 Live with Mike Agnello on the voice of Charleston. 58 WCHS.
Mr. Nice Guy. No more. Mr. Clean. No more. Mr. Nice.
We are not going to play well in the sandbox with others. I'm Mike Agnello, the night voice, WCHS. My very special guest, Keith Morgan, West Virginia Citizens Defense League. And you know what? You try to play nice. You go to the people that ask you to come, like the good Senator Joe Manchin, and then they lecture you on what they're going to do or not do. You were meeting with the senator. You were trying to explain when he was trying to give you this, I don't need any more bullets than 3 bullets to shoot a deer. And you were trying to give him a little lesson on the Federalist writings about what the Second Amendment was all about. Keith, go ahead.
All right. Well, first, I have to give props to your engineer, man. His music choices are just awesome tonight. So, all right. Well, I want to preface this with the understanding that when I'm talking to you about it, and I told Manchin the same thing, I'm not necessarily talking about us. I feel a duty to posterity. I feel a duty to my son. I feel a duty to any kids that he may have. And as such, you have to examine things with a light to the future, particularly when you're messing with a constitutional right. So, I explained to Senator Manchin, and he seemed like this was all new to him, and it baffles me how a United States senator could possibly not understand the meaning behind the Bill of Rights. But anyway, he acted as if this was all new to him. Well, anyway, Federalist 46 was penned by James Madison. And Madison was a pro-central government guy. He wanted to consolidate power in the central government. He was getting some resistance from folks who had just dealt with and just overthrown a tyrannical central government. And when Madison said we need a standing army, the other sides, they balked. Wait a minute, we just dealt with a standing army. We just had a war with a standing army. We don't want a standing army. The states have their own armies. We'll be good. Well, Madison says, well, look, it's okay. It's okay if you have a standing army, and here's why. Because the entire population will be armed. And no matter how big you make the army, they will never be able to overthrow the states and an armed people. And Manchin basically, this was a deer in the headlights conversation. He acted as if he had never heard this before. And he flat out told me that, defense against tyranny was not a consideration for him.
And what did he respond? I like what you said to him before. I was letting you just kind of go on. I didn't want to interrupt. I'm here with Keith Morgan, West Virginia Citizens Defense League. You challenged him and you said, the state police have 30-round clips because they have to deal with a criminal element, and sometimes a very well-armed criminal element. And you said this to him, and I thought it was a great comparison. Senator, as citizens, we have to defend ourselves against that same well-armed, bad-intentioned criminal element. Why is it so important to take away weapons, again, from a armed citizenry that's fully complying with the law, that are good citizens and want to do the right thing? I just don't understand, how is this going to make any school safer or any place safer by taking away the ability to defend ourselves?
Mike, I have my opinions on that, and I can't speak specifically to Senator Manchin. I can speak only in general philosophies. I think for the past 40 years or so, there has been a movement really starting in academia and branching out from there that violence is never acceptable under any circumstances, even self-defense. It seems like this philosophy has gotten really pervasive in academia and spread into politics, into the political realm, that it is better to die at the hands of your attacker than defend yourself.
Then to use the same ugly violence that they're perpetrating on you. I think you're absolutely right. I
yes.
think, just like one of the stories that never got out was in San Antonio, Texas, 2 days after the Connecticut shooting. What happened was a guy came in to kill his girlfriend at a restaurant, shot her. The people ran out of the restaurant, ran into the theater next door. This guy followed them into the theater, wanting to kill more of them. But there's one difference. This wasn't a gun-free zone. This theater, unlike Aurora, Colorado, allowed you to have a carry. There was somebody in there with a carry. It was an off-duty sheriff deputy. She had the gun. She hit him 4 times. He didn't shoot anybody else. That story never made it out because it doesn't fit their narrative. Guns bad, people bad. Guns are a tool, and I want good guys with guns stopping bad guys with guns.
Well, and ultimately that's the only way. That's the only way that you can stop forces with force.
Let me just go on to this real quick. I won't go through a lot of them. We just have a little while, but this is some of the executive actions or orders from the president. One of them says this. This is, to me, a little bit of a scary one. It says, direct the Attorney General to receive categories of individuals, categories now, prohibited from having a gun, and make sure, now listen to this, dangerous people are not slipping through the cracks. Talk about a value judgment. Dangerous people. So now, by their stroke of their pen, somehow people become dangerous people. And then here's one full of hypocrisy. issue a presidential memorandum to require federal law enforcement to trace guns recovered in criminal investigations. Well, please don't say it's Eric Holder. He let go of 25 to 3,500 weapons. He is a mass murderer. If anybody should go to jail, I say Eric Holder should. He's personally responsible for more deaths by giving it to criminals, drug cartel people, and there was no tracking devices. It was a ruse. But now this is the same person we look to track weapons. I just think it's so scary. And now turning our doctors into police and having them turn in their patients, I wonder what that will do to the patient-doctor relationship. I wonder when people really do need help, when they're having some emotional issues, maybe a mild tranquilizer or something that could help on a temporary basis, maybe they won't show up at all now because they don't want to be turned into the federales.
Well, and those are all good points, and I have to tell you that my big question when you read an executive order that uses words like categories and dangerous is who determines those categories, and who decides who's dangerous and who's not? Who doles out the government blessing of being able to exercise your rights? And that bothers me. And then you look at there's something that a lot of people don't know about the whole Fast and Furious debacle with Holder and the ATF. Quietly, as all of this was happening, I remember very clearly there was a media campaign that came out of the White House about the violence in Mexico and how we're responsible for it. Well, what happened after that, you had your media campaign, and then the follow-up, the BATFE released rules that if you sold multiple rifles, you had to report those. And that just struck me as a completely false pretext, a generated crisis for the purpose of enacting registration.
There's no doubt in my mind this was a setup. Let me ask you this: give me the final point of the conversation, because we kind of interrupted you about Senator Manchin. Didn't seem like he understood self-defense and weapons.
Well, yeah, I think he understands. My take on it is the guy understands. He just doesn't care.
So he's going to okay what, in your opinion?
Well, he said that universal background checks, limitations on magazines and assault weapons, and some sort of mental health care reform were what he supported.
Now, I will say this, Keith. I do support somehow, some way, keeping weaponry out of the hands of emotionally, mentally disturbed people. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
As does the WVCDL. We're not in the business of arming felons and psychos. But I have to tell you, the big issue there is Senator Manchin sold us out, and it's a blatant sellout. And he told me something as we were talking there. It was towards the end, and because remember I'd walked in there with the intention of trying to save the guy, and we walk in there and we're talking to him, and it finally comes up, we've got nothing. This guy is against us. He's against the Second Amendment. He doesn't believe in a check on tyranny. He doesn't believe in self-defense. So we've got no ground here. So I tell him, Senator Manchin, I say, we are going to be there at every fundraising event, at every single turn where you're trying to run your candidacy and your campaign. We're going to be there, and you're not going to like our signs. And his response, there won't be any events.
Wow. I'm here with Keith Morgan. This is Mike Agnello, the Night Voice. Much more to come on this debate, and we'll even open the lines up and take some calls. 304-345-5858. 304-345-5858. This is a conversation we need to have, and we also need you there on Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, the state capitol. It's us. It really is us standing together for the Constitution. Not about Republican, not about Democrat, not about Mountain Party or Independent. It's about our constitutional rights. Again, this is Mike Agnello on WCHS, the voice of Charleston.
He's got his finger on the pulse of the community. This is 58 Live with Mike Agnello on the voice of Charleston. 58 WCHS.
Life is so strange when it's changing, yes indeed. Well, I've seen the hard times and the pressure's been on.
Life is changing, and it's changing very strangely here. This is Mike Agnello. I'm the night voice on WCHS. My very special guest, it won't be his last visit, I assure you, is Keith Morgan, West Virginia Citizens Defense League. Let me just, we're going to go to the phones, 304-345-5858, but just one final point. There's one executive order that I do agree with, but we didn't need an executive order because this is already in place. There is a federal program, but he wants to provide incentives, whatever that means. He'll give billions to make solar panels that don't work, but he's going to provide incentives for schools to hire resource officers, and we'll call that hardening the target, as you told me. And you've met some. I've had two on the program. Having a trained police officer at a school, one of the best things we can do.
There are enormous benefits to having an officer in the school in that they become part of the social process inside a school. So they're learning how things are working in the school, where the problems are, plus they provide a deterrence and the ability to send return fire if there's a problem. But I will say this, I don't think that's enough. When you're looking at hardening a target, you have to examine more than just putting personnel in the target. You have to look at access capability. How do you get in and out of the school? How do people get in and out? What's your method for validating that folks that are there should be there? But these are all types of things that I think should be examined. I don't think anybody's doing it.
Well, no, we're only talking about kinds of weapons and sizes of magazines. They are fixated on the gun because they don't like guns. They have a visceral reaction to guns, and I've cited on this program every night good guys stopping bad guys, whether it's women hiding in their own homes, store clerks, deputy sheriffs off duty in theaters, good guys with guns stopping bad guys with guns. 304-345-5858, and we will go to the phones. Brian from Red House. What's going on, Brian?
How you doing, gentlemen? I'd like to make a couple quick points if I could.
Sure.
The problem that I have with the mental issue executive order is you and I, of course, could sit here and agree that we don't think people that are mentally ill, should have access to guns. The problem is defining mentally ill. And the president and his current staff, to them, mentally ill is people who homeschool their children, people who have Ron Paul bumper stickers on their vehicle, people who's not interested in vaccinations. And it's the same way what they did with terrorism when they come up with all these rules for terrorists. Well, you and I might sit here and agree what a terrorist is, but the definition of terrorism changes with each administration. And so I think we got to be very careful there. And one of the main reasons why I think the American people is going to sit back and take this is you got too many American people who have their hands in the government coffers. I mean, the government can't just come out and say, all right, we're going to take your guns. So what they do years in advance of that is they give people stuff. And they provide their home and their food and their cell phones and their free medical care and all these other things. And once you get a majority of the people depending upon the government in some form or fashion, they can do anything they want to do because, like the old saying says, you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you.
Brian, it's well said. Last night on the program, there was a couple studies that just came out really validating what you're saying. Employers now are looking for people that have only been out of work 6 months or less. They're throwing out their old resumes, people that have been off work a year or two and sitting around just collecting the check. They don't want them, which is going to make them almost permanently unemployed. And you're right, that the 80% of welfare spending will go up in the next 10 to 11 years, creating just, again, that dependent class. And but anyway, I'm going to let Brian, thanks for the comments. I don't mean to move along, but I just want to give Keith a chance to respond.
Well, Brian, I think Brian brings up a really good point. And I think that President Obama has done something dangerous with this particular executive order. And the reason that I think so is that there is a huge difference between somebody with psychological issues and somebody that's a danger to themselves and others. And the problem is that an executive order like this can lump it all in together. And the net result of that is that people will not seek help. They will not seek treatment. And then you're going to have some guy stewing in a closet with a rifle until something terrible happens.
You know, that was my problem. I thought he brought up, Brian, it was an excellent point. Just because we may be going through a tough time, maybe a divorce or maybe a loss of job or who knows what, maybe just a downtime. We've all had them. So you go to your doctor, maybe gives you some mild tranquilizer for a moment, just, because you're going through some rough times. Well, now does that clump you in? We might be overstating and oversimplifying it, but I hear what he's saying. Doesn't seem to be any standards here. You're right. But now you've got doctors tasked to turn in people, and they might lose their license, their ability to earn a living if they don't cooperate with the federales. Now you've got people, like you're saying, are going to be very resistant to open up to a doctor on some of the emotions they may be having because they don't want to be turned in. No, this is a big bowl of I don't know what.
Well, there has to be a solution somewhere. Now, when it comes to the mental health angle, unfortunately, though, I don't feel qualified to present that kind of solution. I could probably, I know people who are, I could get their opinions, but I'm not an expert on that. But my fear is you've got to delineate between just somebody who's dealing with depression or has some type of issue and somebody that's truly a danger to themselves and others.
I want to invite everybody again to join many of us that are going to be out there Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, at the state capitol in support of our constitutional rights, an appreciation of guns that have freed us, guns that have protected us, armed law-abiding citizenry that have provided for ourselves, whether it's hunting, defense of our person, defense of our family, defense of our property, and just a general defense of a community. It's went on since this country began. Please join us there. Also, a very special Saturday morning Business Matters. I'm going to have you talk about an informative program Saturday morning, the Better Business Bureau. Wait till you hear the scams that are going on out in our state, especially after these storms. You don't want to miss Business Matters at 8 o'clock Saturday morning. We're going to be highlighting many of those scams. But I'll go to the phone because they called in right at the last minute. I can't give you a lot of time, but we'll give you some time. How's that? But and this is Etzel. Hey, Etzel.
I want to ask you something. What about the military coming back from Afghanistan that has all these psychological and emotional problems? There were more of them that committed suicide that was killed in Afghanistan last year. Should they have the right to have a gun?
Well, again, that should be done on an individual. Just because somebody would want to hurt themselves doesn't equate to they'll hurt others. Many times they're going through a tough time, so I don't want to make that kind of medical judgment, but that is an issue.
I don't think there should be no partiality shown between military and civilians.
Well, there's not about partiality. Again, I think things should be judged on an individual basis. Generalizations are usually kind of tough to make. That's what we're talking about tonight.
Well, and you'll want to be careful with, there have been a lot of diagnosis of PTSD coming out of the military, and we want to be, the PTSD doesn't necessarily mean that there's any violent nature of any kind there.
Etzel, thank you for your call and concern, though. I've got, I don't mean to hang up on anybody, but we can't get to the calls. I know you want to get in. We're out of time. 9 o'clock tomorrow. 9 o'clock. We'll have a 1-hour show tomorrow. Join me at 9 o'clock. The conversation will go on. Keith, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.